Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Ozymandias Project. Trireme Transit, the newest and most reliable state-of-the-art time-traveling transportation service, is now boarding for all new and returning passengers. Now departing, present ponderings. Next stop is Ancient Odyssey.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of the podcast. This week, I chatted with John Haberstroh, a friend and current classics PhD candidate at UC Riverside. John and I met after the Ozymandias Project began proudly partnering with the Save Ancient Studies Alliance, for which John volunteers. This was such a fun and fantastic conversation because we are both extremely passionate about the open access barrier issues that often people encounter when trying to get involved with the ancient studies. We made sure to offer our thoughts on how to deconstruct common artificial barriers, moving away from a top-down patronage-style funding model to a more sustainable funding model, and about the ways people can better participate in growing the awareness of the ancient studies. I hope our conversation will inspire all of you wonderful listeners to check out SASA's events and to continue to listen to the podcast. With that, enjoy this episode, and I will speak to you all next time. All right, so thanks for joining me on this fine morning. I just want to start by asking you a little bit about yourself and how did you get into classics? Because I've always found that it's a pretty unique story for everyone that I meet. There's no right way in, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah, there's lots of ways to get into this. And sometimes you get stuck and you can't get out. But my name is John Haberstroh. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of California, Riverside. And I study Greek history, a little bit of Roman stuff, a little bit of Persian stuff. And I just have a lot of fun with what I do. And it's kind of nice to spend my time researching and reading up on all of these really interesting topics that I get into. But how I got into ancient stuff is kind of backwards because I actually started off as an undergrad major in history studying colonial America. And I thought that's what I wanted to, get into. And I imagined myself being a high school teacher or something like that. And as I took these courses in colonial America, I kept coming across these intellectual influences that our so-called founding fathers had about Greece and Rome. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me check that out. So then I took a class on ancient Greece, and I basically got stuck in antiquity and never returned to studying American history. So I had a really great mentor at Cal State Long Beach. And he eventually became my master's thesis advisor. And then he convinced me to do a PhD. So then I spent a year at UCLA in their classics Postbac program. So I got that was a real ringer, let me tell you. And then, then I just got sent off to UC Riverside, where I'm hopefully going to finish my dissertation here in a year or so. But yeah, that's how I got into it. It was kind of an accident.
I think that's pretty par for the course. I would say, when I went to college, I went in as like an anthropology major just because I didn't know classics existed. And then first day of school, a girl in my dorm who was like, her room was like 3 doors down from mine. I just remember she was complaining pretty loudly in the hall. So I just kind of went up to her and was like, hey, you okay, dude? Like, what's up? And she was like, I'm so bad at history and I'm so bad at mythology and things. And she's like, I don't know why, but I'm in this mythology course and I know I'm going to hate it. And I don't want to go alone. It's the first day of school, freshman year. Help. Will you come with me? And I was like, oh, I didn't know there's a mythology class. Sure. I'll go. So long story short, I went and I loved that one mythology class so much that I went up to the professor after school, kind of ambushed him. And then I said, hey, can I stay in this class? And then he said, sure. And then after meeting with the anthro advisor, she said, yeah. Myth is part of our classics department. I think that's where you should be. It sounds like where your interests are. So here's the advisor. Have a good life. So,
wow.
Yeah. So I think, we all fall into it somehow and then stay there. But so everyone has like a lot of different areas of interest, certainly, because it's impossible to just pick like one. But What would you say your favorite area of interest is, the favorite topic that you're currently working on?
Yeah, so my primary research interest is in this concept called Panhellenism. And this is a modern construct of the ancient Greek past. Basically, it's another way of saying collective Greek identity, right? It's this kind of label that's often used to describe different things in Greek history that I've come across. And I stumbled upon the word Panhellenism when I was in my master's program. And I just saw it being used in so many different ways and in different contexts. I thought that this was weird. And so I kept reading more and more. And basically, it's kind of a catch-all that just gets thrown around. And I think that's not intellectually a good way to go using that term. And so I see it as my mission, my scholarly mission, to kind of problematize that term and basically say that every time I see the word, I think, what do you mean by Panhellenic? What is Panhellenic about this particular thing that you're actually talking about? Because I can imagine 10 different ways that it's not Panhellenic, that if you look at it from a different perspective, this is clearly showing some type of local tradition, or it's going against the grain of the kind of collective discourse of culture, of political history, of different things. And so in order to tackle that humongous topic, my research focuses on Greek sanctuaries. And I'm looking at Greek sanctuaries in the northeast Peloponnese. And so this is, near Corinth, near Argos, near Epidaurus. And so there's these 4 sanctuaries that I'm looking at, and I'm looking at them from a local point of view. I'm deliberately fronting the local aspect of these sanctuaries, because all of these sanctuaries at different times in history, they're referred to as Panhellenic sanctuaries. And again, I think, but were they really Panhellenic at all times to all people? No, of course not, right? Yet Panhellenic is just the easiest adjective you can use. And so it gets tossed out there a lot. And part of it is, I'll concede, there was a Panhellenic dimension, right? There are these festivals that attracted folks from lots of different places in the Greek world. And, they would come together and participate in communal rituals, athletic festivals, ritual sacrifices, and, different types of processions and, different things. However, if you look at how often they do this, these festivals are once every 4 years, sometimes. Sometimes it's every 2 years. That's not a very frequent, that's less than we celebrate birthdays, but yet those instances are seen as kind of these moments where everyone comes together and it's kumbaya. And then another aspect of that is that these sanctuaries were hotly contested among local city-states. At one point in the early 4th century, Argos goes over to Corinth and says, hey, we like you. Let's merge our city-states together. And Corinth is like, okay, sure. And so they literally join their city-states together, and Argos celebrates the Isthmian Games of a particular year, and it was 390 or something. And it's like, but that's Corinth's state festival. Why is Argos celebrating the festival? And again, this is just an instance of local city-states are trying to assert their influence upon these local sanctuaries. And they're doing it really interesting things with it. And so, this whole region here has these, I'm looking at these 4 particular ones, but, these sanctuaries are much, much more than simply symbols of a common Greek identity. They are tokens that are fought over among local Greeks.
I think it's really interesting that you have chosen to look at these sanctuaries when I think the most obvious example of Panhellenism that I can remember from being in school was talking about the Olympic Games and then some of the smaller games. So I think it's a really cool dimension that you're like, no, you know what? I'm not just going to do the easy one. I'm not just going to talk about the games. Like, that's boring. I mean, everyone just travels around, competes in these games. And then in our culture, we use Panhellenic. You're right. For a lot, the first thing that popped in my mind when you said Panhellenic these days, as stupid as it sounds, I was like, oh, every Greek system on campuses, right? For sororities and fraternities. When I was at Mizzou, I remember they were doing the Panhellenic Council something. I had friends who were in sororities, and I was not. So I was like, what? Okay. Well, I mean, I guess this is Greek life, but I'm like, you're not really Greek, but
And
yeah.
the irony of Greek life is that they use the words sorority and fraternity, which are much more close to Latin than it is to Greek. It was an interesting idea, I think, and it wasn't designed by classicists, I don't think.
So can we make an argument that you should be redesigning the entire Greek system, quote unquote, for college campuses? Should we have a classist go in there and say, no, if you want to be Panhellenic, you got to do this, this, and this.
And you have to do it every 4 years in the same place, and you have to sacrifice 100 bulls, and there's going to be lots of wine, and that, yeah, if you don't do it like that, you're not really Greek. Yeah, exactly.
It's fun to imagine. I'm like, well, what would we call them though? What Greek name do we have to give them if we don't want them to be fraternities and sororities? I'm like, I don't even know. That's a hard one.
Yeah, because you have to find a Greek term and then you got to turn it into an English version. Yeah, because I think brother would have been something like Adelphos, and so I can see why it wouldn't sound good in English.
Well, we sort of have that already, right? I mean, the city of Philadelphia is right. City of brotherly love, which is just Adelphia, which is the plural of siblings or brothers, and then Phila as the root for love, right? So I'm like, I don't know. Philadelphia is like a city, so you could probably do a takeoff on that, right?
Exactly.
Each
campus could have their own Philadelphia.
The Philadelphics? I don't know. That sounds terrible. I was like, I don't know. That sounds terrible. Like,
sounds like an a cappella group.
Oh gosh. I was like, well, for this reason, I can imagine this is why they went with the Roman terms. It kind of makes
sense. Yeah.
It's very hard to translate Greek, but it's fun to try, and so I would challenge anybody who thinks they can find a better term to do so, and then let me know, because I'm very curious. Like, if you have a better term, please tell me, and then tell John, and then we can go to the Panhellenic Council, the national one, and say, hey, we're gonna redo this for you.
I hate to break it to y'all, but you've been doing it wrong for 150 years.
So, okay, you said I think you're the first person who I have talked to so far who has done a postbac of any kind. Can you just sort of explain for everyone what a postbac is and what it looks like for classics?
Yeah, so a postbac laureate program is usually a 1-year certificate program, and they're offered at different research universities. Ones that I know of are UCLA, the one I went to. Penn has one. Iowa State, I believe, has one. So they're out there. They're not very common. They're not common, I think, because they are, you have to pay for them. They're not funded. So it is kind of a big chunk of change I had to dole out for that one. But again, it's a 1-year program. And in classics, it's basically a year to just study Greek and Latin and just completely immerse yourself in it. And, they encourage you to take other classes in, history, archaeology, and basically whatever your interests are. But the focus is on learning and developing your Greek and Latin. And the point of a postbac is usually to be a bridge year between your undergrad and a PhD program. And that's basically what I did. And thinking back, I've basically been in school since 2007. I've been in college since 2007. So I went BA to MA to postbac to PhD. So that's, I guess that's kind of a traditional route, but also that's becoming not a traditional route too. I can think of plenty of folks who are starting their PhD programs in their 40s, and they're kind of returning to ancient history or classics. And so, this year I had at UCLA it was a hard year. I was taking four language classes at a time every quarter. I took a grad Greek seminar on Xenophon, and that, let me tell you, that was just, I didn't think I was ready. And my advisor at UCLA, he's like, it'll be good for you. And I thought, famous last words. And then so I did it, and it was a real challenge. But I think I came out for the better on the other side, which is nice. And I really do think that if you're interested in pursuing a PhD, you really do have to, at this point, the way PhD programs are structured, you do have to demonstrate competency in Greek and Latin. as well as French and German or Italian or some other modern languages. And so it really will prepare you, I think, it's safe to say. As much as I kind of hated it at the time, it was good for me. And I would not be able to be in where I am in my PhD program without that formative experience.
Yeah, and I think that's really awesome. I remember when I was probably a junior. By then, I had some stuff going on along the way during my college years, which made it really hard to take the ancient languages. And then I got lazy and I had some leftover, very handy AP French credit that I'd transferred over. So basically, I ended up with this really unique situation where I transferred in the language, so I didn't actually need to take any languages to graduate from college because the requirement was just transferred in. So then I was like, wow, well, now nothing's forcing me to sit down and take a language that's very difficult. So I ended up taking like a semester of ancient Greek, but then I had other things. And then I sacrificed my languages for a chance to study abroad 3 times in college.
Great.
So I chose travel over language, which for most people, they'd be like, fine. No, everyone wants to travel. You travel, go, do it. Yeah, I was like, sure. But in hindsight, I'm like, well, yeah, it's great. I got to travel and I don't regret it at all. I love my travel experiences and everyone I met. Good. But also, yeah, I like shot myself in the foot regarding going on in classics. So by the time I had that conversation with my advisor, he was very much like, I don't know if you are thinking about going into grad school for classics, but I'm just here to tell you that you are not going to have the requirements. You're not going to have the languages. I'm really sorry. So, this is the time where you should tell me yes or no if you're thinking about going on, because we need to realistically sit down and think about, you should probably do like a 2-year postbac at this point. And I was like, okay, what does that entail? Where do I go? So he kind of sat me down and we went through the list of schools that do offer postbacks in classics. And I just thought to myself, am I really going to fork over $30,000 a year for 2 years to take language classes? That seems such an artificial barrier to put up in a young person's way.
Yeah.
And at that point I was like, well, I've devoted several years of my life to this area of study. Like, this would really suck. I think I want to go to grad school, but I don't really want to do this if it means getting into just an MA program. So was there a situation where you might have been able to get into a PhD program without doing the postbac? Or was it like you absolutely needed it, and there's no way you could sort of fudge your way through and take the languages as you're starting your PhD program?
Yeah, I think that's hard to say. I think the advice that I was given was, John, you're not going to get into a program. You haven't taken enough years. At the time when I applied, when I was doing my master's, I had 2 years of Latin and 1 year of Greek, which that's probably not enough to get you into a PhD program. And so doing that year at UCLA, it was like, if you do that, that will get you, that's your stepping stone, basically. And so I took a chance on that advice, that expensive advice, and it happened to work out for me. But, I think it's possible that if you are interested in archaeology, classics, history, anthropology, whatever it might be, if you don't have those languages, there may be programs out there that put less emphasis or don't have any requirements for languages. Typically, archaeology is good for that, depending on the type of archaeology that you want to do. But I do know that that's a lot of European universities are starting programs like that now, where it's like there's no Greek or Latin requirements. It's just you're here to do archaeology or whatever. So it is possible, I think. But at the current state, you have to have at least a little bit of, and it's measured in years, which is kind of a strange idea, because at this point I've been studying Greek and Latin for 10 years, but I haven't been doing it like every single day, all day. That's why the postbac is so useful, because it's forcing you to be on top of that 5 days a week, at least. It was more like 7, to be honest, for a whole year. But yeah, I think when you're applying to PhD programs, you really have to do your research on the programs and to see what's out there.
For sure. And this is kind of great because you are a grad student. So in a way, you have more hands-on experience than any professors probably would recently, at least, when looking for the postbac program that would have fit you. I know you mentioned that they're only at a couple of schools. It's not just something that you could go to any university and be like, hi, let me do this, which kind of just contributes to those artificial barriers that really get at the whole heart of the accessibility issue to this subject matter, to these fields. Just off the top of your head, would you say most of these postbacks are offered at the top institutions in the country for classics?
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet there. They're going to be at research universities. So they're going to be big universities with big departments that have a lot of faculty, basically. So, where I did my undergrad, there were 2 Greek teachers and 2 Latin teachers, and that's it. That's not enough people to run an entire postbac program. UCLA, they have like 30 faculty, right? So they have the person power to handle a lot of students, grad students, undergrads, postbacks, master students, right? Everyone. So typically your large state universities will have postbac programs. Yeah.
So if you're about to graduate from undergrad, or if you somehow got a master's and didn't need the languages, but you want to go into a PhD program, either way, if you're somebody who needs the language, then how can we make it better? How can we make it easier? How do we take down some of these access barriers? Because what if you're like, hey, I have certain skills, I'm really good at certain things. For whatever reason, standardized testing is not your jam. Like, it's not mine. Like, I'm a terrible standardized test taker. I will tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you, like, I was really scared to apply to grad schools in the US because I knew that they would require the GRE. And I knew I was just going to like get a terrible score. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's going to be good enough if they're looking at that. I know that things are moving away from looking at your test scores. It's like a comprehensive way of evaluating people, but I know it's still a required component as of now. And also, the languages, and say I don't have the money to do a postbac. So how do we make it easier? Because it just seems so hard to get to where you want to go if you get all these stop signs in your face where, no, you need a postbac because you don't have the languages. Oh, you don't have money? Too bad for you. Stuff like that. How do we make that better? Because I'm always looking for ways to take down artificial barriers that we keep putting up for people.
Yeah, and that's a big problem. It's something I encountered along my journey, my academic journey as well. I had a professor from a university I will not mention say to my face, literally, you will not make it in the PhD program at my university because you don't have the languages. And I was like, oh, okay, nice talking to you. See you never. And I do what I can to not talk to that person. So yeah, it's a very real problem, this kind of eliteness, this attitude of this is the ivory tower. This is literally the ivory tower that people talk about. This you can't enter because you're not qualified type of thing. And so I find it incredibly rewarding and really critical to my kind of academic persona is to kind of communicate the ancient world, or at least the stuff that I do, in a way that folks can understand and that people can engage with.
And, what would you say are the best ways to get involved if you're a person who you like classics, you like mythology? Sure. You definitely don't want to go to school for it, and you don't really want to do that much academic research, but you're just you have a passing interest. You're like, okay, these people are chill. I support what they're doing. I like what they're doing. I'll happily listen to them talk about what they're doing. I just don't want to do it myself. What would you say are like some of the best things that people like that could do to help us out if they're clearly not going to join us? What's the argument for, great, that's totally fine, you don't need to join us, but hey, if you like what we're doing, here's how you can help us, here's how you can support us?
Yeah, so there's different levels of commitment that you could do, right? So I think if you're just a casual learner and you just are curious about topical things, or maybe there's a new movie that came out that has an ancient theme and you're kind of curious about, is it accurate, or is it, how true are they trying to be? I volunteer with an organization called the Save Ancient Studies Alliance. And this is a nonprofit organization that was started about almost a year ago now. And our mission is basically to make ancient studies accessible to the broadest possible audience, and really to inspire a younger generation to take up the reins and feel like classics is theirs for them to take on. And it's not just, I should correct myself, it's not just classics. It's archaeology, it's history, it's languages. It's not just the Mediterranean, which oftentimes when you hear ancient history, people automatically think Greece and Rome. We're talking about Mesopotamia, we're talking about Egypt, we're talking about ancient India, ancient China, medieval Europe, right? We're trying to do it all. SASA puts on different live events every month. Sometimes, they are book club meetings where, an author has published a publicly accessible, fun kind of fiction novel about ancient Egypt or whatever. And, we could you just get together and you talk about the book, right? That's easy, right? You don't have to try that hard. We also have at SASA, we're really investing a lot of time in archaeo gaming. So there's a lot of video games being made in the past couple of years that have ancient themes and scenes and plots and lots of fun stuff. And so it's fun to pick apart all that stuff that we see, and is that accurate, right? Or I think it's kind of fun to just leave video games fantasy. That's my own opinion. But there's something to be said about the presentation of the ancient world. And so, I think it's maybe once a month or so that we have different guest speakers come in, and SASA moderates a discussion basically about a particular video game that has ancient content. So, if you're casual and you just want to show up and listen, like you're more than welcome to attend our stuff. And there's more information at our website, which is saveancientstudies.org. And, if you find yourself with lots of time on your hand and you actually want to be a contributor to the mission of SASA, while also at the same time enriching your own knowledge of what's out there, I'm actually the team leader of the Access team. And our team works on two major projects. One of them is creating an online database of resources that we're compiling of basically all project websites and online texts, museum tours, and so forth. And we're trying to compile them all into one giant database and have that publicly accessible to be a one-stop shop for folks to find information about the ancient world. And whether you're a teacher or you're a college student and you gotta study for an exam, or you're doing research for a paper or something like that, we're going to kind of keep all this stuff in one place for you all to access. So we're always looking for volunteers to help out with that project, to track down online resources. Another thing that we're doing is, and this is kind of, I guess, if you're more interested in formal study, we have also another growing database of where to study ancient studies. So we're finding every department, every program that offers something related to ancient studies, broadly defined. And we're starting off with mostly US and Canadian universities, but we're going to branch out into European universities and so forth too. So we're going to have a massive database of where to study with formal programs. So again, we're looking always for volunteers to help out with tracking all that information down. And I should also add, there's another really fun one that I'm involved with. So SASA, every summer, we have these text in translation groups that meet sometimes once a week for maybe a month or two. And they're topically themed, led by a grad student or early career scholar. And it's all text in translation. And so you read up on some ancient documents in translation, and you get together and you just talk about it. Again, there's no grade, there's no papers to write. It's a very low-key affair. and it's another opportunity for you to kind of do what you like, which is read about ancient stuff. And then, you get into a discussion with someone who's a expert, so to speak, in the topic. And it's just a way to kind of continually learn about the ancient world and keep up your own interests. And so, look forward to announcements in probably April or May about our next summer reading groups. And we had one back in January just as an experiment for a shorter period ones, and we had pretty good attendance at those too. So we might end up doing it 2 times a year. So, and again, these are all free. Everything that SASA does is free, so it's so that it's accessible to everyone.
Yeah, and I think that's really great to finally have some entity out there that's like, hey, we're not going to just like stubbornly paywall you. You want to read the Epic of Gilgamesh? Like, here, pay us $20 and then we'll give you a translated copy. I'm like, no, I don't want to pay $20. Like, I will just go to the darkest corners of the internet. No, I won't. But the expression still stands. I will go to the darkest corners of the internet to find my free stuff. but ideally, we don't want to make it harder, right? We don't want people to have to work really, really hard to get what should be really, really simple information. And this is why organizations like SASA are so important, just in terms of ease of access, but also, literally, if you want to learn, we're here. We'll teach you. Just come in the door, like, please. And it's just a wonderful change to see from essentially what the analogy I give the fields usually are just they slam doors in your faces and say, well, sorry. Oh, well, if you have this, this, and this, and this, sure. Come on in. But otherwise, bye.
Right. I don't have time for you if you don't have this or that. Yeah, it's sad but true. It happens, and so we exist to hopefully counteract that. That all the the SASA is run by basically a horde of volunteers, grad students, and early career scholars, and there's a personal investment that we have, right? We see our fields dying as we are trying to get in. So that's not like a great thing to observe as you're trying to get started. There's a perception out there that ancient studies don't matter. And so we really feel committed that it's our duty to turn that around. We will work with everyone and take everyone with us along the way.
So I love that SASA does archaeogaming, because anyone who has listened to this podcast by now knows I am very, very on the archaeogaming wagon. Our podcast, our organization here at the Ozymandias Project is also doing our own archaeogaming events as well. I believe there's a lot of crossover there, which is really, really cool just to see the interest and just see people excited about it. But with video games being so popular, do you think that that's the future that's going to save the ancient studies? Is it like the one thing that we know can hook people who have never heard of the ancient fields or classics? Or is it just like do you see it like a passing trend just because, video games are popular now, and especially with the pandemic, people are just like playing them now since you can't leave your house? Are we going to find something better that may save us if we, as the leader of the access team, like, do you see maybe if you break down more barriers in other ways, would that be a better catalyst? Just if you make it easier, more people will just do it.
Yeah, those are really great questions. I think archaeogaming is still relatively young as a subfield. Let's say, I think Assassin's Creed kind of started the big push to really look at the representation and portrayal of ancient stuff in video games. I mean, there's way earlier games like Age of Empires. I was a huge fan of that when I was a kid, and Civilization 1 through 6 now, I think. So think of the target audience, right? Those are probably kids ages, like 8 to 18, through high school, maybe. Plenty of college kids play it too. But, I think if young people, it's about exposure, right? Because when you're living in America, you don't just like wake up and walk outside and see the Roman Forum out of your door, right? You see probably a grid of suburbs, maybe some skyscrapers, but those don't have like an ancient connection. So in America, we have less exposure. So I think video games are very easy way, I think, to turn kids on to just what's out there. And I think it's also important that it's not just Greek and Roman stuff. I mentioned this before, but there's tons of stuff with ancient China and ancient India, ancient Mesopotamia, right? These are lots of other cool places that have stories that can be depicted, I think, in really cool ways. So, whether or not it's the magic bullet that's going to save ancient studies, I'm not sure that it's that, but it's something, and it's visual, and it's tangible in a way, because you're not holding an artifact, but you're manipulating the environment, right? And I don't know anything about predicting the future either. I'm a historian, not a futurist, but I think virtual reality stuff, I think there's lots of potential there too. So the second virtual reality software or whatever is able to get really good, I can imagine reconstructions of ancient Athens or these places. And you can't go study abroad? Well, put on your VR headset and take a walk through the agora, right? And I can imagine that being a really cool way to get people interested.
Yeah. So, archaeogaming is just one element of combining the ancient studies with pop cultural things, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I'm a gamer myself. But, in terms of like the other media side for people who don't call themselves video gamers, most people are exposed to the ancient world or mythology in some way through books, film, TV. And right now we have, and they're getting better, but we have some movies and shows that, they're set in or based on the ancient world, or they involve mythology of some kind. These aren't always the most accurate, are they?
Yeah, there's a lot of, it's artistic media, right? So you're going to have a lot of, artistic license that the creators are going to exert, which is, it's their prerogative, I suppose. But at the same time, we do a disservice to people who are maybe less critical of what they're consuming, in that if you depict it in a certain way, they're gonna leave thinking, oh, well, that's how that becomes their imaginary, right? You're filling a void with your interpretation, and unless you research it more on your own, which most people aren't going to do, and that's okay, unless you do that, that image is going to stick, right? So for all of us, when we think of, the second I say think of an ancient Greek statue, you're immediately going to picture some white marble, broken arms, and it's going to be, that's what you're going to imagine. The ancient reality, however, that we know of from studying archaeology is that most, if not all, marble was painted in very colorful ways, right? And so how do we, the next time we make a movie about ancient Greece or Rome, for example, if there's white statues in the background, something's wrong. I think, at this point, it has become so well documented in modern news media outlets that there's no excuse anymore, I don't think. And so we'll see what this, this Cleopatra movie that's been, announced. We'll see what they what they come up with. But I think, it's time that we correct some of the stuff that we do know, but while still allow artists to practice their art, I suppose.
These are two industries that are just notoriously bad at talking to each other, right? Classicists, we hate doing outreach, and I can't stress enough how much we hate like talking about ourselves and trying to explain who we are. The entertainment industry is its whole different thing. They just kind of run and do whatever, and sometimes they try to be more accurate. Sometimes they're just like, no, we don't need that. And I would love to see an accurate representation of one of these ancient cultures just once. Some do better than others, but I can't remember the last time I saw something about Egypt where Egypt was just like wasn't in ruin. why is ancient Egypt always just portrayed in ruin? Like, you see the pyramids and then you'll see they're like worn and old and they're covered in sand. And I'm like, well, if you're living in ancient Egypt, they're not going to be old and covered in sand. They're probably going to have that nice, shiny, limestone-ish covering. It's got the gold point. Why is it in ruin? Why does this temple have buried that wouldn't be accurate unless, you're trying to be Cleopatra and then you're looking back at Pyramid of Khufu. I don't know. So, one, I just stray observations I always think of are Egypt is always in ruin. And then when you try to even do something that we would consider like an update or more modern, one of those things I can think of is like just more racially diverse casting. I know that the Troy miniseries on Netflix, Fall of a City, it got so much flack because they cast a Black Achilles, a Black Patroclus, a Black Zeus, and people were like, no. What do you like? No, he can't be Black. And I'm like, well, I mean, who said he can't be Black? I mean, personally, I mean, weren't the gods always traveling to Ethiopia, right? Like that was their spot to go. So I'm like, but he could be. I don't know. They're traveling to Africa all the time. They're having children. That's what they do. So, if people can't even handle just like racially diverse casting, I can't imagine the reaction for, you put a Parthenon in a movie that's like completely painted up the way it's supposed to be. Oh my God. I think, anarchy would reign down. People would lose their minds collectively. Oh my God, it's painted. It's horrendous. Like, what are they doing? So, how do we do a better job then of us as a field and industry? How do we talk to Hollywood and say, here's how we can help prep you to put something accurate like a fully painted Parthenon in your film or TV show without like freaking everyone out and then getting scared by the reaction of inevitably all the people who hate that and then get scared and then lose money and then say, no, we're never going to do that again, which would be a mistake. I mean, I think at this point in our culture, people want accurate things, and I don't think it's bad to show them accurate things. I mean, 300 was entertaining, sure. We all know the Spartans did not wear like leather diapers and they did not all have the same capes and no. Like, give me something accurate, please. I'm ready. We can handle this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think 300 was palatable, but the sequel, oh my gosh, I was like screaming at the TV when I watched it. Oh my goodness. And so the bottom line is that even if we were to tell Hollywood, hey, by the way, the ancient Mediterranean was this like really dynamic, diverse place with lots of different peoples, even if we did tell them that with compelling arguments and evidence, the reality is they would still choose to portray it how they like. So I think that type of stuff is more of a Hollywood problem. Now, at the same time, though, think about your classes, right? When you were an undergrad, when I was an undergrad, was that type of diversity and color emphasized in your classes or even discussed? Probably minimally, maybe a little bit. I'm sure, if you're studying Homer, oh yeah, Helios, he goes and every night he goes down to Egypt, Ethiopia, and that's where he goes to sleep. And it's like, okay, like that was weird. Moving on, so like there's these opportunities, I think, pedagogically to bring up these issues to students. And again, when those students, the idea is that there's a chain reaction that happens. When you learn something, you go off and continue your life having that new knowledge. That's the whole point of going to a university, I think, is to acquire knowledge and produce knowledge, and then to take that knowledge and go do something with it, right? So when we like, broadly speaking, the people who study this stuff, we go out and we're the audience for the future Hollywood productions. And maybe it's our job to raise more of a stink and, critique them openly, make it uncomfortable for them, to let them know that like it's enough is enough. It's stereotypes. What it comes down to is stereotypes, I think. And I think we're getting to a point in society where we're kind of tired of that.
Do you think that we should be going and talking to like theater and film departments in schools and saying, hey, we should have some crossover, like take some of our classes, because maybe if we can get to them early in schools before they're professionals working in the industry. You know, if you have a bunch of theater and film majors taking classics courses, might that help put it into their minds? Hey, I can be creative, but I can also find a way to be creative and be historically accurate. So then by the time they get to the working world, they'd say, hey, I have an idea. I think I want to do this. This is the premise of my movie pilot for my TV show. And guess what? They don't even think about putting in something that's wrong because they learned what was accurate.
I think there's something to be said for that. You know, I think it's the cross-pollination of different fields, right? Exposing theater majors to ancient Greek and Latin drama, like that would be fantastic, right? And I'm sure that's already part of their curriculum, but more engagement on that kind of historical level is, again, I'm biased because I'm a history PhD, but you know, I think that it's very valuable. The more people can see it and engage with it, the more beneficial it will be for them in how they see the past, but also how they see the present. Because at the end of the day, these representations in movies and TV and film and all of that, it's narrative. They are telling a narrative. And so by portraying it in a certain way, even with images are a narrative as well. And maybe the narrative is to be different. Maybe that's their goal. And if so, well done, you did it. So I never realized I was such a freedom of speech, freedom of artistic expression kind of person. But, you know, I think but again, I'm approaching it from a very like scholarly academic, you know, they can make whatever they want. I'm going to analyze it either way. It's the side effects though of those narratives that become problematic for audiences. So again, as you mentioned that Troy on that BBC series, that was a huge controversy, and I'm just sitting over here analyzing the narratives on both sides, and it's really fun. So, and the funny thing is like portrayals of gods, because it's like, I never met Zeus, never seen him. How do you know what he looks like? So it's a totally open question. And so, it looks funny.
I mean, there's also levels to this, right? I mean, for me, I'm like, okay, obviously there is a certain level of artistic license where I'd be like, okay, fine. Clearly that very much is up to interpretation. But then there's certain things that I just find like completely like, no, if you took a basic history or geography class, you would know this. I mean, I think the one of the biggest things that gets me is every time I watch the Brad Pitt Troy. Do you remember that first scene when they show Sparta, when they go over to Sparta to introduce Menelaus and Paris and Helen and Hector, because they're all there celebrating their peace treaty? And the very first shot you see when it pulls up Sparta on the screen is a harbor with boats and water. And I go, does anyone realize that Sparta is in the Peloponnese? It's completely landlocked. To get to water, you need to go like 50 miles in any direction. So I'm like, why is there a harbor? This is not Sparta. This is not their harbor. They would be literally anywhere else. And like, that to me is one of the most egregious things I could possibly have seen ever, because I'm like, that's not just creative interpretation. You can't just like displace a city and put it geographically somewhere new. I mean, how pissed would people be if I just took Athens and was like, you know what? I'm going to put this in the middle of the Gobi Desert. No water. Like, what the hell? Like, no.
Right.
So,
it's just ignorance. Right.
Yeah. It's things like that where I'm just like, that's something you literally could easily correct, but they don't care, or it didn't occur to them. And I'm like, oh God. Oh, yeah. All right.
It hurts us.
It does. It hurts me deeply. And you're right. I'm glad you mentioned the 300 sequel, because Themistocles is my boy. Anyone who knows me knows I love the man. I want to study just the man. Cool. Just obsessed with him. And so to see what they did to him, I'm just like, this gives me anxiety. Yeah. Why did you do this to my boy? I never
imagined Themistocles as a like young strapping lad. I always imagined him as like some older gray beard, not riding horseback and jumping on it from ship to ship on horseback. Like wow, they really turned him into something that completely violated all of my preconceived notions. How dare I think of him in that way, I guess.
I know what you mean. I mean, well, because when you there aren't that many sources that survive that talk about him. There's certainly no like comprehensive biography. I mean, you have to find him sprinkled in Pliny and a couple other sources.
Herodotus, Plutarch. Yeah, they have. Yeah,
he's like sprinkled in. But like when you do read of him, they always talk about, his wisdom, how he's a statesman, he's very proper, and he's very smart. Yeah, nowhere do they say he's like young sex symbol. Because we all, right? So, I go in and then I'm watching the movie and I'm like, hey, that's Sullivan Stapleton. He's like that big, really nice looking Australian dude who just looks like that, beach bod, Thor light, whatever. And then you're like, oh, this is awkward. I'm like, wait, no, I think of him as just like Gandalf type. Wait, what am I doing? I don't know if that's what you're seeing, but like I'm seeing my Themistocles as like Gandalf type. So I'm just like, this is very awkward. I'm like, I don't want to be fantasizing about this person. Like, ew, no, he's not a sex symbol. Stop that right now. But I mean, I suppose that's not how I see Leonidas either, right? I don't really imagine him to be this young Gerard Butler, very cut sort of figure.
I mean, I guess I do. I'm never gonna not see Gerard Butler like screaming in your face, like on the poster, movie poster. I think they've altered my perception of Leonidas. So good job.
That is the power of film, right? For some historical figures, you're very wedded to a certain idea of them. And then some you're like, I'm happy to let the entertainment industry just completely take over and shape how I see this person.
Entertain me.
Because I was like, when I'm reading about this man, I'm like, yeah, I'm sure this man's like this 50-year-old gray beard dude, whatever. Like, they don't live very long back then. And then, yeah, you see like 30-year-old Gerard and you're like, oh, yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's insane. But anyway, I think we've covered a lot about what we want to see, what we want to do, just in terms of getting back to the world of realism. Like, yeah, whatever that is, quote unquote. And then another quote unquote. How do we do all the things we want when we are losing funding? You can't do all these great ideas if you have no money. How does one construct this into like a solid enough argument for, hey, this would benefit everyone? This has practical applicability, which are like the magic words for anyone with money, right? You got to convince them that it's worthwhile in the short term, for sure, especially in the long term.
It's communication and just being evidence-based in that communication. So it seems like from your question, it seems like the focus is on universities. Like, what can we do? And for somewhere along the way, universities became an external arm of corporate America in terms of like, oh yeah, we're going to make every entry-level position at our corporation require a bachelor's degree. And it's like, do you really need a bachelor's degree to do that entry-level thing? Probably not. So there's this preconceived notion that you have to go to college to get a job, which, yeah, okay, maybe there's some benefit to that. However, you shouldn't have to get $100,000 in debt to do that, right? And ultimately, what that translates to is a defunding or dismantling of academic programs at colleges and universities. Now, the cost of higher education in America is a completely different conversation, and I have thoughts about that. But getting back to how do we package the humanities, ancient studies, broadly speaking, and how do we sell that and make people want to invest their time and energy into it? I think it falls back onto corporate America. And again, I guess I'm a little biased in this outlook, but look at our leaders, look at our corporate leaders, look at our political elite. We expect the best of them, and yet many of them are less than perfect. And I'm not saying they have to be perfect, but I think one of the benefits of studying ancient stuff is there is a grounding in, or at least as I try to teach it, I should caveat that, there is a human component that needs to be emphasized. And it is through studying the people of the past that we learn about ourselves. We can treat them as a menu of sorts of decision-making, of leadership styles, of experiences of joy and sorrow and everything in between, right? Learning about those things enriches the person. I believe that people who graduate college should be able to, of course, read, write, and orally communicate at a basic or proficient level, but also they should be good people. They should be people who have a commitment to ethical decision making, to evidence-based practices, to being able to empathize with fellow people. I believe that ancient studies, broadly defined, is a magnificent gateway into that human element that I would like all of my undergraduate students to leave university with, about how to look at the world, how to interact with different people, and just understand that your decisions have consequences and there are rights. I guess there's at a basic level, there's right and wrong ways to do things. And so, I'm not saying we should all be philosophy majors now, but, I think there's something to be said for the thoughts of ancient folks, right? And then on top of that, looking at how those ancient philosophies and beliefs and worldviews influenced the very people who created this so-called modern world, right? And for me, it goes back to the Enlightenment, the so-called Enlightenment, right? Where all of a sudden the lights came on and they had these great ideas. False. They were reviving lots of other old ideas, I believe. And they put their own kind of modernist twist on it. And then we have capitalism, right? So for all its good and ill, right? Capitalism has its drawbacks, but also some benefits, I suppose. And so let's stop and think about those things and see where we are and where do we want to go, right? And I'm not saying we need to recreate Euclidean or Pythagorean philosophy, but we can take all the good parts of that and we can shape our own world, I think, using some of those good ideas and putting our own needs at the forefront in how we become the kind of crafters of our world.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously I usually start by asking from a very university perspective, just because that's where most kids hopefully are going to go and then going to try to enter the job market that way. And so for non-university organizations, kind of like SASA, like the podcast even, we are organizations that are trying to also foster this love of the ancient world, this interest in it. And we would love to help people earn their degrees in the ancient fields. So, but it's for something like SASA, it's volunteer run. It's a nonprofit, and NGOs, they run off donations. So, it's not like you're rolling in the dough. Neither are we.
No. There's no dough at SASA.
Right. So it's like, how then, if universities are kind of hamstrung due to politics, institutions, I mean, there's just so much at play that goes behind how universities get their money. And a lot of it, yes, is through donations from alumni. Well, unfortunately for us, we rarely have alumni who make it rich and then can contribute $90 million for things like, Mizzou just got a new $90 million stadium for the football team. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's awesome.
Our priorities are good there.
Yeah. And I think, and I mean, that was a couple of years ago, but I mean, I think, or late last year, like end of 2020, they got a $10 million donation for just a new exercise room in the stadium, like a new pump room. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. I'm sure that their state-of-the-art stadium needed another state-of-the-art room, just one room alone, sure. But my whole department just cut a bunch of funding. And so instead of being able to accommodate like the usual 10 grad students for ancient Mediterranean studies, they were like, hi, we have 5 spots. So funding is a lot more competitive. And sorry, only, we can only take 5. And I'm like, yeah, no shit. Our field is dying when you cannot pay your grad students.
Right.
So, what can organizations like SASA and like the Ozymandias Project do? It's a different game because we don't have those same funding barriers, but we have a whole different set of funding barriers. So how does something like SASA, which is a nonprofit, go forward? And then how does something like the Ozymandias Project? I mean, we are an LLC. We are a for-profit business. So our funding sources are going to be different as well. But, is there common ground here where we can try to find a line there that works to sort of help people at the non-university level?
Yeah. SASA, the Save Ancient Studies Alliance, part of our mission is to reverse this downward trend in department funding. And I'll be the first to admit, the field, broadly speaking, we've kind of done it to ourselves. We have not communicated what we do in an intelligent way that's accessible to broad audiences. And also, we're also competing against this idea that higher education is job training, that you need to go to college to get an engineering degree because it'll get you a job. I'm sure there's plenty of underemployed engineers out there, and psychology majors and business majors out there. It doesn't matter what major you are. You can be underemployed or unemployed just as much as a history major or classics major. So, and again, study after study shows that, over the course of a career, history majors make more money sometimes than psychology majors or business majors in their median career income. So it's just a fallacy that doing liberal arts is not worth your time. And this is where the target audience becomes a little bit different than college students, right? So, because college students, once you're there, you pretty much have an idea of what you want to study. And it's going to take something dramatic to change that. So we think that it is even younger than college students. That is the real target now. So turning kids on to ancient stuff in elementary school and high school, right? So that they know that it's a part of the choice when they do go to university, if they choose that. It's not just business, psychology, and engineering when you go to college, right? And I think that's what a lot of high school students think that they have to get into. And by exposing them to it at younger ages, they can hopefully foster a love or maybe an interest in it, so that when they do get to college, if that's where they're going to go, then they can possibly pursue that. And because again, at the end of the day, the $10 million donations for workout rooms, they aren't going to the classics department because that's the funding priority of the donors, right? So if we can get it, and it's a numbers game, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And so it's going to take a generational shift. And when people go through these programs, then their priorities will be on rewarding and giving back to those programs that they came through. It's a tall order. I'll be the first to admit that. And it seems like we're swimming upstream here. But we, the people who do humanities, broadly speaking, ancient studies included, right? It's our turn to kind of step up a little bit and be more inviting, I think, and break down some of these barriers that we've self-imposed to bring in more people. Which, if you don't have butts and chairs, you get defunded. That's basically what happens. At least that's our perception of the situation. It's going to take a lot of folks, and SASA has a lot of really great people who just want to do the best that they can do. So it's really cool to be working with them and to have met them and be united on this endeavor together. So hopefully we can change some young lives so that it'll do a paradigm shift later. Yeah.
Well, and then I would even say, well, one, it's great that the organization exists to help people, for sure. And I'm really excited that, we're doing something very similar. So I'm glad that there's a lot of crossover and that, we're able to sort of work together to further our collective goals, for sure. Because I think, more organizations kind of banding together to work toward a collective goal is going to be really important, especially since there aren't many outside of the university setting to do this kind of work. So I think that's really important. But also, I think one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, at least, and my opinion may change on this, who knows, next week, I have no idea. It's very changeable. But I think one of the questions I'm asked most by people who aren't in the field are, hey, I'd like to get involved, but I don't have the bandwidth to do much beyond just sort of casually check you guys out. Like how do I help you even though I have no time to devote to actually helping you? And what I've started to realize is I tell people now, okay, you want to help us. You either didn't go through college to study what we're studying, and so now you're completely in a different field. That's great. So I tell people, well, if you're in a completely other field, if you somehow have a measure of financial stability that I think everyone in our fields kind of worry about, oh no, am I going to get a job? How am I going to get a job? How am I going to pay off all this stuff? And I say, if you have any extra money at all and you feel comfortable, you can just turn that into a donation and donate to organizations like ours or a school or something. Reach out to find a grad student and say, hey, I think your topic is great. I really like this topic. I have, an extra $2,000 laying around. Can I help fund your research? Because I'm like, there's plenty of ways, I think, to get involved with archaeology, with ancient studies. I've become, I think, over the last year, a big proponent of, if you want to be involved, you don't have to be the archaeologist yourself. I mean, right. That's a lot of years in school and training that you don't have time for. Great. If you fund a grad student, you're going to be like one of the first people they thank, for sure. Like, you are literally helping them do their research. So if it's like a, I want to help, but also I kind of want credit thing. Yeah. Like, if you have money, like, donate it to a grad student. 9 times out of 10, I can't think of any grad student who wouldn't say, hey, if you've always wanted to come watch a dig, do a dig, if you're going to fund my program, I will invite you to the country I'm doing my dig in, and you can come see the work being done. Like, to me, that's just an easy way to involve somebody who kind of wants credit for doing something good to help out, but also just to spark that interest, right? I mean, if I'm doing field work, in a foreign country and someone just wants to travel and see this stuff, fund me. You can come on the plane with me. I will show you what I'm doing, talk you through it. And at the end, you can just get a great old pat on the back when I cite you in all of my thank yous and acknowledgments and, I don't know, put you in my book. And so you could say, I was in a book. I did this thing. I funded this grad student. This is my new best friend because we found a coffin together. Like, I think right now we're stuck in like if you want to do any of that, if you want to go to be on a dig, if you want to do anything, I think like the overarching feeling is I have to be that person, which makes it really hard. And I think, we can have a conversation about, okay, well, yeah, if it's too late, theoretically, quote unquote, for us to get to you early in schools, I think that would be a good avenue to pursue as well. Just get to people who aren't going to be in the field, and we've already reconciled that. But hey, yeah, you want some credit?
Right.
You have some money lying around? You making that nice paycheck over there?
Yeah, exactly. And the ancient parallel that I always think about when I think of like public donations is, the ancient Greek euergetism, which is this public benefactions. If you're a rich guy in the city or whatever, and you got a bunch of money and you donate a bunch of money to the festival that's being held in the city, or you pay to fund part of the army or something, the city like commissions a statue for you and they put it up in the public square to like remember you for forever. Why don't we do that anymore? Like, why can't we convince some wealthy people to donate some money to a classics program, and then we'll tap into our interdisciplinary avenues, and we'll get people to sculpt a sculpture, and we'll put it up in the quad, and it'll be there forever, right? Like that. I don't know. We got to bring that back, maybe. I don't know, but we got to paint the statue, though. Remember?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think there's just so many good ways to do that. And I mean, I think, we're also, a lot of these fields historically have run on that like patronage style funding mechanism, right? Where just a bunch of like rich people are like, hey, this is my hobby. throws money at said thing, and then
then they
you
want to
get
control it, and then they want to
and they
get their noses
it.
all in it. Yeah.
Right. And then it takes away a lot of the freedom you have as a scholar, though, especially if you have one rich person coming in and saying, well, I'm going to fund your whole thing, so now you have to listen to me, and one of the things I spend a lot of my time thinking about also is, how do we move away from relying on this patronage style system that still exists for some fields more than others. I can think archaeology for sure runs a lot on that. And Egyptology as well. But I'm not saying we need to completely do away with the system, because let me be very clear. We will be very happy to take your money. Like, we are very, very happy. If you want to give us money, just we'll take it. Great.
Lexie will commission a statue for you.
Right. But I'm, so my argument usually is like, yes, we will still take your money. Don't be afraid. If you're like a rich donor, you will still have that level of control if that's what you're like, I want to do this. But what I'm saying, with this argument mostly is we just need to not solely rely on that funding model, because I feel like we only rely on either schools and government money or rich people. So I kind of think of this after all my experience working in politics since I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it as like almost like the Bernie Sanders style movement of small dollar donations, right? Where it's never been done until Bernie did it. But then like all these small dollar donations started coming in, and I'm like, the average was like, what, $17? So I'm like, so if you have young professionals or even mid-age professionals, but not just rich people who've had a lifetime to get rich, but like, yeah, if you take a bunch of 30-year-olds who are all young lawyers and each 10 of them contribute $1,000. That's, a lot of money. Look at that. That's a small grant from one person, usually historically. So, you spread the credit, right? Like, you can literally get a bunch of small donations, make up a large sum of money, and then that's just more people to thank. More people you bring in who you make to feel like they're actively helping and contributing, even if they only gave, say $500. Hey, you're still going to be mentioned in my thank you for my dissertation. You'll be mentioned in my first book, whatever, blah, blah, blah. We'll list you as somebody who cares about saving humanities. Like, we'll give you credit. Like, that's not an issue. We want to desperately give more people credit for helping us out. I think it's just people don't realize that.
If someone gave me $500 to write my dissertation, I would send you birthday cards. I would send you flowers every month. I would express my gratitude. And I just think, that's probably not going to happen for me. So that's okay. That's okay. I'm just trying to get done with my degree. So I think the issue with that is that it takes a lot of effort because what the universities do is they go to the wealthy alumni and they say, hey, I know how much your net worth is. How about you kick back a million, just an easy $1 million to the university, right? And they're like, oh, okay. So like the amount of time they spent to get the big ones is less than they would if they had spent a lot of time to get a bunch of little. And so, but that's where Bernie Sanders, love that guy. He was a genius, right? When it came to that, just donate $1, right? And we can it's a movement, right? And I was surprised by how many of my friends actually contribute, not just to him, but just to like other causes, like the animal shelter and like other things, right? I'm always surprised when it's like, I gave $35 to the animal shelter last week. I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel bad now that I didn't do that, right? So I think that's an interesting way to publicly fund the humanities is small dollar donations. Who knew?
Working in politics has offered me a really rare and different insight into different ways to fund it. Because I mean, politics, what is it? It's just a game of people looking for money so they can run for their next thing or do the next thing. So, I figured, if I'm using my practical abilities here to contribute to the ancient world, one of the things that I think I can bring is a perspective on funding, because I see so many, there's no right way to fund anything in politics. So I'm like, so why can't it be the same in the humanities? I mean, you just have to be brave enough to create the system, to put the idea out there and just be like, hey, this might be a good idea. This might be a good idea. And if you can get enough buy-in, you could really start something. So yeah, I remember being shocked when Bernie had so much success, and I just said, well, that's a pretty good model. I wonder if that could transfer over to something else like the humanities. But it does take a lot of time and effort, and it doesn't happen overnight. But
right.
And
grad students don't have the free time to be asking for money.
Right.
And the fact that we have to ask for money is also
awkward.
An indication of something's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's just awkward. I mean, but this is why I'm like, organizations like the Ozymandias Project and like SASA, I think, could be valuable partners in terms of, promoting that message. But I mean, I understand as well that, both that organization and ours are made up of like literally grad students and people who just like don't have time because they're working. So, you would have to find more people, more time, more whatever. And the uncomfortable part is you do actually need to go beg people for money to even help you start and get to a place where you could have the manpower to then talk about moving away from this patronage style system. So I understand the challenges there, but these are just like long-term thoughts that I have about funding, because I spend so much time thinking about how do we get money and like stop this uncomfortable, hi, we're poor, can you give us money please? Like, it's just so uncomfortable for me to think about, and I'm not even a grad student yet. So just
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard. And to all your listeners out there, if you are considering doing a graduate program, master's, PhD, whatever, don't do it unless it's funded. Honestly, it's really not worth, especially a PhD. My goodness, if you have to pay for that, I assure you there are better ways to do what you love without forking over dozens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. So I just want to say that, but also, graduate students, it seems like every week I'm working on some other grant application or fellowship application just to make the ends meet for my existence. So, being able to ask politely while also rigorously explaining your research, while also being accessible in its communication, it's its own job. Honestly, I could spend all of my time doing that stuff and still not get anything, by the way. And so it's very challenging, and universities have made it clear that they can't give money to everyone. And so, it becomes this really competitive, kind of toxic sometimes atmosphere. And so, there's got to be, I'm glad, Lexie, that you've been thinking about how to publicly fund them without going the political route and without going the kind of big dollar donor route as well. And I think we should all consider how we might best achieve that.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to continue this, but there's not enough hours in the day because these are such heady topics. But
that's right.
At the end of every podcast, I ask each guest to read Percy Shelley's Ozymandias, because I think one, it's my favorite poem of all time, and two, it is just a gorgeous poem that I think really stands the test of time in terms of its messages and its applicability. So, if you could read the poem, and then, obviously I'm not looking for the most erudite answers possible. I don't need you to theorize your way through it, but, just if you could give us your initial thoughts, just, what does it evoke for you? How does it speak to you, essentially?
Cool. Now the classicist in me wants to be like, well, which edition are you going to use? Which translation are you? But I'll just do this one here. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. I should confess that I've never read that poem in my entire life. And so it was really cool to be able to do that now for you. My initial takes on this, it seems like, again, my historian brain is always tapping into things about memory and, the desire of humans to be remembered. And I think that this poem really gets at this, memorial aspect. And I think there's a time element here that's, there's a foreverness in kind of physical memorials. And also it's the power of the words, right? I like this line that the author includes, right? And on the pedestal, these words appear. And then it's a quote, right? So in my own work on kind of Greek history, like inscriptions are huge. We think about audiences, right? Who's going to read these things? Can they even read them, right? But regardless of all that, it's a permanent or semi-permanent kind of way to be remembered. And I think that all of us, young and old, maybe more so when we're older, we think about like, what are people going to say after we're gone, right? How are they going to remember us? And what's our legacy, right? And I think that this poem really brings out that aspect of how do we be remembered?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great take. And I guess the politician in me definitely jumps right to, this is the best commentary that could possibly have been made on the ephemeral nature of political power and the hubris of man.
Buried in the sands, yeah.
So as a classicist, I read this and I think one thing, and it's funny because when I was younger, I wanted to be an Egyptologist, and so that love never went away. So I consider myself sort of like a literary Egyptologist, just kind of like sitting in my armchair over here, and
that's the best.
And I guess there's so many different perspectives you can take from it, but it's really. It's a memento mori, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
it's the fact that nothing is permanent. And when I asked our mutual friend Christian Casey about it, it's so funny because he gave me just like a classic answer, which was, oh yeah, this was Ramesses the Great. He's gone now. There's nothing left. And then I was like, oh. You hit it right on the, I was like, you got this. So Ozymandias is the Greek translation of Ramesses, his throne name. So it's kind of beautiful just to in a way see, oh yeah, he literally thought he had the best, most powerful empire in the entire world, and his civilization's gone. We wouldn't remember him at all if it weren't for this, even the artisan who like sculpted the thing for him.
Mm-hmm.
So like thinking about it kind of that way, then the final question I'll leave you with that I have started asking at the end of each podcast that I love. It's my favorite question now, I think, is if you interpret the poem kind of that way as just a statement on the ephemeral nature of power, what in modern society, or is there in modern society, a modern day Ozymandias?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, because again, the poem is referring to explicitly to some kind of physical memorial, some kind of object that was created to last. In modern stuff, I don't know. For some reason, I'm thinking of like the Eiffel Tower. I don't know why the Eiffel Tower is coming to mind. I just saw it on the news the other day. Maybe that's why I'm like thinking about it, because it got repainted or something. Yeah, I think, why was the Eiffel Tower painted? Well, because the Olympics are coming there in 2024 to Paris. And so they painted it gold or something like that. And they had to remove all of the old layers of paint. in order to paint the new paint. Sure, that's like kind of what you do when you paint stuff. But they've removed all of that previous stuff to put on something new. And then what are they going to do in another 50 years? They're going to scrape off that old paint and put something new. So we're constantly trying to renew our facade. And so I don't mean to be too metaphorical here, but maybe the Eiffel Tower here is our Ozymandias, or it will be an Ozymandias in the future when it too becomes buried in the, well, there's not really sand in Paris, but
you can still say sands of time.
The sands of time shall do their worst.
Very Prince of Persia, I know. Yeah, I mean, and the thing I love about that question is that there is no clear right or wrong answer, and I get so many different ones, but I think it's a really great question. I think that sparks, what do we consider permanent? And one of my favorite examples was my former professor said an old casino in Atlantic City, right? Because when those things came, we were like, oh, this is great, this is the thing, it's going to be here forever, and it's going to make our society last and work and run. Yeah, they're gone, they're abandoned, they're just sad and desolate, right?
Yeah, oof. Yeah, that's depressing.
Yeah, see, so I'm like, there's so many different answers, but
well, if I can offer a second possible one that you've inspired me to remember here. Honestly, I think the internet. We think the internet is this end all be all source of knowledge, but like all it takes is a couple flooded basements and all the servers are destroyed. And rather than publishing books in print form, are we really going to have like USB drives 2,000 years from now? Like, what are they going to read about us? Because right now we read about the ancient peoples because of texts that were copied over and over and over and over. I'm worried that the internet is not going to be that permanent. Now, of course, someone in 50 years would be like, oh, that guy was an idiot because he didn't think the internet was going to be here. But there's something ephemeral to the internet that I think is underappreciated because it's so convenient for us.
All technology for that, right? I mean,
yeah.
When the first iPhone came out, people were like, this is it. This is cutting it. Like, this is it.
Humanity right here.
Right. And then I'm like, so now we're on the iPhone 12, and how many features does this new iPhone have that the original just never would have been able to, like facial recognition, all this stuff. So I think, there's an argument to be said for all kinds of technology in the internet, because I think eventually we're going to have like Star Wars style holograms, right? We're going to have like teleportation. Someone even was like, cars and planes are going to be Ozymandiases, because we're going to have instant teleportation where you like have these like teleportation elevators in your home, and you just like walk into one and then you exit wherever in the world you want to be. And I was like, I don't really see that coming, but in 1,000 years, who knows? We might have, everyone has their own teleportation station in their house. Sure. No one needs a car anymore. So I want to thank you for joining me again this morning. It's been super fun being able to chat, and good luck with the PhD and everything.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. And I hope that your listeners had a little fun listening to us, and feel free to pitch in or get involved.
For sure. And I'll drop the link for SASA in the show notes. Today's episode has proudly been sponsored by SASA, the Save Ancient Studies Alliance.
Are you interested in ancient civilizations? Want to learn more about the origins of Assassin's Creed? Obsessed with ancient Norse, Mesoamerican, or Chinese mythology? Then join SASA, Save Ancient Studies Alliance, to remind the world the importance of ancient studies through fun events like archaeo gaming and book clubs. SASA is always looking for volunteers. Don't be shy, reach out and tell us why you love ancient studies. Visit www.saveancientstudies.org to learn more.
Trireme Transit is now departing ancient Odyssey. Next stop is Present Ponderings. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.